Bonjour à tous and welcome everyone to our virtual conference presented by Récolte, Food Hubs Using Social Innovation for More Resilient Food System. It's a panel. Over the past decade, food hubs have established themselves by filling the gap in terms of infrastructure and services to aggregate, process, and distribute locally produced food. By strengthening the local food economy, those versatile models represent a pillar of food system resilience. What can they teach us, and how can they support a local and integrated food system in Montreal? This is a question that our moderator, Laura Howard, will try to answer during this presentation with our guests. Laura Howard is a co-founder and director of business development and partnerships at Collective Récolte. Laura's drive and passion is in reinforcing local food systems and building thriving local food economies. Having worked for over 15 years with community-driven initiatives related to circular economies, social innovation, and social entrepreneurship in connection with local food system development. Laura is passionate about helping those on the ground leading needed change achieve their desired impact. She is the co-founder of Récolte and Parler la Bouche Pleine, as well as the organization Taking Root. Her previous experience includes working with agriculture communities across Canada and around the world, supported the startup phases of food tech company for farm to restaurant sourcing solutions, and working with a diversity of stakeholders throughout Quebec and beyond in support of systemic shifts in the future of food. Laura, I leave you the floor to introduce the participants of your panel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very, very pleased to be here to be introducing our three panelists today too, and having them share their ideas. Again, we at Récolte focus on helping those that are leading change, and we are very lucky to have three people most definitely leading change in their communities. And so I'll speak a bit first too. So we are recording Nourish Innovation. There are two other panels taking place during this afternoon as well, which is the farm to fork, getting more local ingredients on your restaurant menus, and accompanying tomorrow's innovators, which is coming up after this panel. So if you are interested in looking at different angles about what we'll be talking about today, there's other panels that are being recorded and you're able to access them and or join the upcoming panel this afternoon. And just a quick introduction on Récolte before I jump into our presentations, that once again, Récolte, we focus on reinforcing innovations and social impact in local food system development. And so we really do look at catalyzing social innovation and impact for the future of food. And for us, the future of food is sustainable, local, viable, ethical, local food systems. And we do this through a blended support of consultation, accompaniment, and community mobilization. And through that, we're very lucky to come across, once again, the people that I will be introducing to you today. And so I'm going to start with Alicia Lake, who is the Executive Director of the Pan-Cape Breton Food Hub Co-op, a multi-stakeholder cooperative that operates an online marketplace, making it easy to get products from local producers into the hands of consumers. She has an MBA in Community Economic Development, as well as a diploma in Public Administration and Business Management, and has dedicated her life to strengthening the local food economy, in part from her own experience growing up on a farm. So thank you, Alicia, welcome. We also have Haile Johnston, which is the co-founder, Johnston, excuse me, which is the co-founder and chief development officer of the Common Market family of companies. He is the co-director and founder of this nonprofit distribution enterprise that connects communities to good food from sustainable family farms. He's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business and currently serves as the advisory board chair of the National Farm to School Network and is on the steering committee of the Castagna Fellowship, which we look forward to hearing more about. And finally, we have Daniel Rotman, who is the executive director of the Depot Community Food Center in Montreal, a not-for-profit community organization that is fighting hunger and poverty in the west of Montreal. In his 6 years in this role, Daniel has designed and implemented a merger with two other food organizations, food security-based, which has enabled the Depot to transform from a traditional food bank into Quebec's first community food center with over 20 award-winning healthy food programs. Daniel has also worked as a management consultant for social entrepreneurs and social economy organizations, and is particularly interested in new and innovative solutions to social problems and works hard to build these solutions collaboratively. So thank you again to all three panelists. So we'll go quickly just to what are we talking about today. So what we are talking about today is food hubs. And so what is the food hub? Again, what we look at a lot in local food economies is there's a link between, and food hubs are business organizations that manage aggregation, distribution, and marketing of source identified food products. They are very, very essential to scaling up local food systems and also other social impact models that we'll be seeing today. So they're a core part to somewhat is now a bit of a missing link in that there are gaps in our current system to ensure that we're encouraging local farmers, we're feeding people within our communities, and we're also helping other and responding to other needs in our communities. So what we're seeing is that what may differ from a traditional food hub to a distribution model is that food hubs tend to be innovative value chain based models, but that have triple bottom line approaches, which we'll see a lot today, economic, social, and environmental as well. So really looking to respond to needs and having impact within their communities. And what you'll be hearing is probably a bit of an approach between what is a community food hub and from an aggregation distribution point, and what's a community food hub in terms of a community service center where food services are often offered as an entry point. So food services are not necessarily the only service provided. They're a way to respond to a need in the community and help engage members of the community for other needs. It may help to address socioeconomic barriers such as employment training, nutritional, cooking, budgetary planning, cultural and religious support. And again, we will hear probably all of our speakers speak to this today, but that poverty is considered the root cause of food insecurity, and therefore community food hubs also play a role in community advocacy work, research, outreach, and support. So it's, while we're talking about community food hubs, we are talking to people today that have a blended model to both of these, and that they will be used interchangeably. And when we use community food hubs, we're talking a lot of time about a community service, and food hubs we tend to use as looking at the aggregation district point. But you may hear both terms throughout the discussion today. So I will go now to introducing again our first question, which is, what are some essential criteria for a successful food hub? So I'll put that question first actually to Alicia, if you don't mind, around the Cape Breton Food Hub. So again, one of the most interesting things around your model is definitely your governance model, and you've chosen a multi-stakeholder model which strives to give a voice to every actor in the supply chain. So what we're curious about, and knowing that governance plays a big role and also an organization being impact oriented, why did you choose this model of governance, and what does it represent in terms of the choices you make daily in your organization and how it's run?
Great, thank you. So we are registered as a nonprofit cooperative, and we are a multi-stakeholder cooperative. So what that means is that everyone who buys food or sells food through our food hub is a member of our organization. That means that they are able to vote on important decisions and also vote for our board of directors. So basically, our food hub was founded on the idea that in order to create a better food system, producers and consumers are equally important in the equation. So with our multi-stakeholder model, we're able to get representation from producers and consumers. So for an example, on our board of directors, we have a 10-person board. We have between 2 to 4 consumer members and between 2 to 4 producer members, up to 2 restaurant, organization, or retail members. So when the board is making decisions, we have all of these different perspectives being represented. So it's really important in that way that when we make decisions, we can have, you know, what's best for the consumer and also what's best for the producer right at that beginning.
Great.
And my internet may be frozen because everyone looks frozen. Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you, and I can still see you moving. We're good on our end.
Okay. It's only on my end then. So I think that that's kind of the reason that we chose the model. And I think it's also important just to look at the advantages that the nonprofit model has given us, which really is access to grants for financial stability. So.
Great, thank you. And yes, we can speak a bit more to that too in the next steps around blended financing models as well, because I think that's really important. So if we go to the common market with Haile, the illustration of the financial visibility. So one of the things that has really impressed us with looking at your model again is the approach and the capacity to make a planning around being viable and economically viable while still having a focus on vulnerable populations and serving those with the different needs. And again, a great point that we thought was the element of vulnerable populations, both being those that are producing food and may live in rural communities and are farmers and those providing us with food as vulnerable populations as well, all the way to those who may have limited food access. So in that, we're interested in looking a bit of how have you achieved financial viability under the common markets with having a social impact oriented focus, and how does that sort of look in terms of strengthening local food systems within your area by considering these populations and their needs on opposite sides of the spectrum?
Yeah, thank you. Great question, and excited to be here and share. Again, my name is Haile Johnston. I'm the co-founder, co-director of the Common Market, and we are a nonprofit regional distributor of local food. We were founded a little more than 12 years ago in response to the food insecurity we were experiencing in our own community. And after probably about 6 years of running a small community-based nonprofit working with youth in our own neighborhood to build healthy community. And it was through that work where we were doing urban agriculture, nutrition education, farm stands, healthy cooking classes, that we became increasingly aware of the disease disparity that exists among the families that we were working with. And as we were looking for different means to affect change in our own community and health outcomes, we began thinking about what were the larger systems that were informing access in places like our community of Strawberry Mansion in Philadelphia. And it was through that inquiry and conversations with many others that we began to understand how also in our region, farmers, small, mid-scale family farms, diversified family farm, independent operations were struggling to access markets, how global food systems had begun to favor food grown from California or really any other part of the world over that which was grown in our very own region. And so a lot of the relationships and the social fabric that connects producers in a given region with the nearest markets had begun to erode. And so we saw the opportunity to play this connecting role potentially. And so for us from the very beginning, after having run I'm going to say a relatively small community-based nonprofit, we were very interested in a social enterprise model where our service held the potential for bringing about financial viability for the work that we were doing. And so from the very beginning, and also in part because of the inquiry that we went down, we were trying to figure out what systems level meant. We saw that it was going to be important for us to operate at a degree of scale in order to create a viable service and a viable organization. And ultimately, the financial sustainability of the organization were almost as important as the other values that we were carrying in the service that we were trying to provide community, because clearly if we as an organization cease to exist, our ability to provide service to our constituent communities is diminished. So our strategy to achieve scale from the beginning was focused on institutional food service. And when we talk about institutions, we're referencing typically schools and hospitals and elder care facilities, colleges and universities, and correctional institutions as being often community-based, anchors of the community, and existing in service of community in many instances. And these institutions were places where we felt like we could reach the most food insecure people as efficiently as possible, so thereby creating opportunities for efficiency in our business model, opportunities for the farmers to sell product at scale, in significant volumes into the market. And they were also specific market segments that the small farmers in our region had been prevented from accessing for a long time. So we saw that there was, in particular, this opportunity to create market access in a fair and transparent way that hadn't been present for many farmers in a long time, while also connecting to the greatest number of food insecure people as efficiently as possible. The other thing that we do is the Common Market has, after launching in Philadelphia, replicated in a couple other markets. So we exist in the Southeast, in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Houston, Texas as well. And we operate an umbrella services organization that handles all the back office services for each of the 3 regional food hubs. And part of what we're trying to do there is create a degree of efficiency in the service and economies of scale by spreading some of these services out across the 3 different chapters. And so with that, I'll pause, but those are just a couple of the ways that we work to bring about financial viability.
Mm-hmm. And that's really great, and thank you for sharing that. And most definitely, I think that ongoing question of providing a service to your community and scale and capacity and how that all fits into viability is a really interesting one, and one we would definitely love to have more time to deep dive on and hope to do later. And I think around that, this is where we'll jump over to Danielle as well, because it's not always easy in terms of serving a community and finding ways to create a viable project, and especially maybe within the current context of how we determine value within a society. And an organization like NGG Le Dépôt brings an enormous social value and social impact and is viable in its structure, and maybe just not, and sometimes the way we speak to viability is purely economic. And so we wanted to ask Danielle to speak to that a little bit as well, around what is the role of the depot, and especially around the demonstrating impact, and how showing impact and the value of an organization and services such as the depot should be recognized and maybe upheld in other structures around value to the community, and the kind of diversity of services that an organization and center like the depot provides to its community. So Danielle, if you could speak to us a bit more about measuring impact, capturing impact, and demonstrating value in different ways, that would be great.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to the co-panelists for the very insightful discussion already. As you mentioned in your introduction, Laura, one of our fundamental assumptions about food insecurity, and food insecurity can refer to hunger, but it can refer to not having enough food to put on your plate one time, but maybe other times, or maybe worrying about not having enough food, or eating less so that your children can have enough food. Is a broad range of broad definition. But the fundamental assumption that we approach it with is that food insecurity is a symptom of poverty. And as a community organization, a local community organization, we are not going to be able to eradicate food insecurity in our community because it's tied to revenue. And so one of our missions as the depot is not only to what I'll talk about in just a second, ensure that we are making a positive social impact and can measure that. Another mission that we have is to mobilize the community to fight for social change, to fight for policies that create more revenue for our community members who are living in situations of food insecurity and poverty. And that reflection has really led us to understand our leverage points and understand where we can affect change within our organization, within our programs. And like Haile mentioned before, we were seeing the same things where there is an obvious inequity between health outcomes related to income and class, and that's a large part due to, not in large part, but in one part due to what you put in your body. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we provided an opportunity for our participants to have access to healthy food, to be able to have access to social services, to have access to a community, to break social isolation, which we know is as dangerous as smoking a pack of cigarettes in terms of lifespan and health outcomes. And so what we really wanted to do is we wanted to cater programs that knew exactly what their objectives were and measure that objectives through evaluation, impact evaluation. So we now have a comprehensive impact evaluation program where we not only measure each one of our 20 programs to see how we are doing in each program's in individual objectives, but we also have annual program survey that we run with a representative sample across all of our programs that aims at getting at some of the bigger questions, like the overall impact of the organization on the community and on individuals. So for instance, in a local program, let's say community gardening or collective gardening, one of the major impacts is, yes, we're working on teaching about the food system, but the major impact is, one of the major things is to break social isolation and bring community together. So that individual program evaluation will aim to measure whether or not we are achieving that outcome within that program. But we also want to make sure that we also know that food is an entry point into the organization. So there are multiple entry points. We have 20 programs, and each one of them attracts different people to the organization. And we've seen that we are much more effective in achieving our overall goals if people participate in more than one program. So we know now that over half of our participants participate in more than one program, and those who do see better evaluation outcomes. So when we do our annual program survey, we're looking to see not only did the gardening program break social isolation for you, but did the depot since participating in the depot, has your physical health changed? Has your mental health changed? Have you found someone who you can turn to in the time of crisis? And then we can do some cross-analysis to see which programs are working and which programs are achieving our greater goal. And once we could demonstrate what was working and what wasn't, not only could we adjust our programs and make sure that we were sticking to what worked and eliminating or changing what didn't work, we could also communicate to funders, not only large funding bodies like private foundations and governments, but also individuals, and talk about, this is what we're trying to do, this is where we're succeeding, and this is where we're not succeeding. And that has really allowed for a diversified and sustainable funding model for the organization.
Great, thank you very much. So yeah, I think as you can see, there's a lot of levels to running an effective local food hub, responding to a lot of community needs, and as well as helping to scale up local food economies. And in that, one of the things that sort of prior to a crisis situation that we are recently experiencing and still coming out of, we were looking a lot at food hubs as solutions to scaling up local, and also finding solutions to other elements of what we wanted to see in the future, reinforcing local food economies, reinforcing local rural communities in their development, and as well as providing services to a diversity of people and types. So one of the things that maybe we can revisit, and actually, Daniel, I might start with you again at this round, is we've unfortunately just lived through a crisis and are still living through a crisis. And I think many organizations on the ground are still recovering from the first round and trying to plan for what at least, well, certainly here in Montreal, is coming up to be a second round of an intense isolation, et cetera, for multiple people. And I think one of the things that we also want to understand is, how do food hubs and community food centers have the capacity to pivot potentially more rapidly and really create positive solutions for their communities on a diversity of levels, to responding to needs that tend to be not only multiplied, but also exacerbated by a crisis situation. So we are currently living in COVID, but we can talk about crisis and a bunch of different things, including climate change and stuff that we've been talking about for years. So Daniel, if you can maybe talk to us a bit about the reality of the depot, and now prior and upcoming to, and sort of how it's contributing to having to rethink and or remodel and understand also what you need as an organization to move forward in these times.
Well, there's no doubt that COVID has increased the demand for emergency food baskets in our neighborhood, has increased food insecurity, and has exacerbated the social inequities that we saw before. It's just brought them to light, and that includes mental health and physical health as well, as it relates to COVID. But what is interesting to me is the response to COVID. We saw in the 80s, food banks developed across North America and Europe in response to an economic crisis, and they were supposed to be a temporary measure. And over time, they became sort of institutionalized as major components of the food system. And what we've seen is that they do little to address the underlying root causes of poverty. They do little to improve food insecurity rates and hunger rates in our communities. And they're actually quite ineffective on a sort of they're very effective on a very short-term scale, but not effective on a long-term metric. So what's interesting to me is in Canada especially, we've seen, and I can't speak to what's going on in the United States, but in Canada, we've seen the federal government as well as provincial and municipal governments pour money into the emergency food basket programs to make sure that we are addressing this problem in the short term. And you can just see the institutional gears churning to go back to this food bank model that we know doesn't work. And hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested into emergency food services, when in fact the model of our organization, a community food hub, is actually to bring and build community together and we understand that emergency food services are not going to address the root causes of poverty. And I think this is an opportunity for governments, and I think it's a really critical moment right now for governments and major funding bodies, and even the public at large, and private companies and industry, to recognize that we need sustainable investment in community infrastructure. We need to invest in long-term solutions where we can have spaces to build community, where we can have spaces to break social isolation, to improve health, and to invest in our community and invest in revenue, rather than throwing money at an emergency food solution that we know doesn't work. So I think it's sort of a call to arms right now. We have to mobilize, we have to talk about things, we have to talk about these issues, because right now, we're seeing like I said, these institutional gears churning up and gearing up and lining up to make food banks as a short-term solution that will just continue to be institutional pillars of our food systems, and creating no sort of social change.
Great, thank you. And yes, I'm sure we could go on a long time about how this situation and the continuative. I know that having spoken to you, the infrastructure was a big piece in that, as well as just the space, the infrastructure to be able to scale up quickly, and all of those needed support. So, and Haile, and please excuse me again for mispronouncing your name earlier. So Haile, if you could also speak to us. I think the Common Market has done a good job at looking at reorienting and trying to respond to some of these things as well, while also understanding that it's about putting those pillars down moving forward. So if you could talk to us a bit more about the work that's been done during crisis, and how we see it as maybe leading to post-crisis, hopefully, and are being able to better face upcoming other challenges we may face.
Yes, thank you. And I'm so happy you started with Daniel, because I echo a lot of his energy and comments. I think the greatest thing that we can do to build long-term community resiliency relates to community power building and investment in community, social and physical infrastructure, without question. And for us, for a long time, it's been about, power building in preparation for climate resiliency, because I think that many of us thought that near-term climate was going to bring about the greatest natural disaster, and it certainly is, though many of us didn't anticipate the kind of natural disaster in form of a health pandemic, and the potential long-term economic impacts of what many communities are going to be dealing with as a result of COVID-19. The interesting thing for us is that in response, and I'll also back up just to say briefly, the Common Market's an organization that has never been focused on emergency food assistance. We've always been focused on building positive relationships through food in regional food systems, and building power for farmers, and power in partnership with community organizations. And again, I talked about institutions, but really just as a proxy of community. The thing that was interesting for us in this moment is we had to pivot pretty extensively, significantly, in response to COVID, and in a way relating to some of what Daniel offered. Here in the States, the USDA and many other municipalities created significant emergency food assistance programs very quickly to meet the fairly dire hunger needs of many communities. And the Common Market, again, we were working mainly with schools, hospitals, elder care, colleges, universities. All of our institutional partners closed down in mid-March, and we were left not knowing what the future was going to hold, both for our ability to connect community to good food, but also our ability to connect our farmers to market. And so we responded to many of the opportunities to provide emergency food assistance, first in the city of New York, as they issued an RFP for a pantry box program, but then also, again, through the USDA and also in partnership with the city of Atlanta and Austin, but delivering boxes that more resemble a CSA box, so a community-supported agriculture box. All of the food that we've been fortunate to provide to our community partners has been locally sourced, sustainably grown, and diverse produce offerings, and which looks very, very different than what traditional emergency food assistance offerings look like. And the response that we've received from many of the people who received these boxes has been overwhelmingly powerful, and many of them communicating that they feel like they, for the first time, received a degree of dignity in the food pantry line, because the quality of the food was so good. This was not food that was extra or ready for discard or distressed at all. This was the highest quality food that could be procured locally. And what we're seeing for us, I think the silver lining in the pandemic has been the relationships that we've built with community organizations all across the regions where we work, and the sheer desire of many of these community representatives in building longer term solutions that include greater food sovereignty, that include alternatives to traditional markets and don't resemble emergency feeding programs, but create more of an opportunity to change economic outcomes, regional economic outcomes, certainly within their own neighborhoods, but in partnership with small and mid-scale family farms in the regions where we work. So I think that there is a potentially lasting food system reform that could come from this, as many people are becoming, I think, more aware to some of the injustices that we see in policy, in food systems, certainly, and exploitation in food markets that we see in different places.
Yes, thank you very much. And I fully agree. I think we felt a lot that, yes, it is a health crisis. It's also bringing us to an economic crisis. This is bringing us to a social crisis, which are all intertwined as well. And I think I fully agree with you that we've seen a call, an awakening around, okay, when we're talking for all these people that have been talking about and reinforcing and working at different sites to reinforce local food systems, it's really, we don't have time as much as we thought we might to get that right. And so we're rushing in and trying to figure this out. And I think that hopefully really has brought to light the need to focus on these solutions, of which you are definitely all part. And I think interesting, and we'll jump over to Alicia. So part of, I think what we all agree on is that there's an interconnected between helping communities, responding to a social need, economic need, different types of levels of economic need, from reinforcing economic stability to giving people sort of equal access to, and resources within an economic context. And Alicia, you're sort of actually not living COVID maybe the same way as our other two are. You're in a more removed area and even potentially geographically a bit different situated. So maybe you can speak to us about your reality in this context of crisis too, and maybe how it's having you not being hit as hard by the day-to-day potentially of the health aspect, how it's maybe helping you plan towards increasing the impact or furthering your work in your region, and either preparing for other things to come and being able to demonstrate what's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I think here in Nova Scotia, we haven't been impacted very much by the health impacts with COVID. We've had very few cases, but our economic impacts have been absolutely staggering. So our economy was definitely shut down. All farmers markets in the province were closed in March, which was a really pretty devastating blow to farmers. Almost immediately, we saw some of our consumer members who just were unable to pay their Food Hub bills anymore, almost right away. So, and I think really what's important is that, we've always had these problems here in Nova Scotia. Like, we've always had difficulty with high unemployment rates and difficulty for farmers to access markets. We had food shortages, like within the end of March, you know, it was very difficult to find certain types of foods here in Nova Scotia because we are very removed from this global food system that we've created. And really, I think that, you know, what's important for us to realize is that all these problems existed before the pandemic, and they were just kind of brought to light during the pandemic. And a lot of people started to think more about their food supply. And when we saw, you know, grocery stores running out of chicken, you know, by the end of March, when a lot of other places had it, it really signaled to people that we really need to start supporting our local producers. We were really fortunate here in Cape Breton. Cape Breton's a small island in Nova Scotia, that we did have the Cape Breton Food Hub. You know, a lot of the farmers had said to me later on, you know, if we had not had a food hub, we would have been completely out of business. We wouldn't have been able to pay our mortgages or our bank loans during that period of time that, you know, restaurants were closed, farmers markets were closed. There was really, you know, no other way for food to get to people. So we were able to, because of our long-standing relationships in the community, we were able to partner really quickly with farmers markets and get more and more producers into our system and start selling. We were able to get some grant funding to help out people that were, you know, all of a sudden unemployed because of COVID. So one of the neat programs that we do every year with the Food Hub is we get grants or we fundraise to allow people who don't have financial means to purchase local food to be able to order food from our website just like any other consumer member. They get a promo code that they put in when they order, which takes the cost off of their order. So nobody knows, you know, when they get it delivered, just like anybody else, there's no way of anyone knowing that that person didn't pay, and they get exactly the same service as any other member. So we were fortunate to get some grant funding right after COVID to kind of help in a bigger way than we typically do with that program. And since then, we've been able to, you know, do more workshops online. We're really always trying to build community, you know, through our food system, through a stronger food system, and also to help, you know, with skilling. And, you know, at the end of the day, if we want people to eat local food, people need to know how to cook local food, right? And that can be really challenging too. So I think we've had to do a lot of pivoting. And of course, you know, a lot of pivoting also just to, you know, at the beginning when we didn't know how serious the, you know, how many cases would be here in Nova Scotia, we had to do a lot to protect our volunteers, to protect our delivery company. So there's a lot of health protocols that we put in place too. But I think now, at the end of the day, where I sit is I just want everyone, you know, everyone who's running food businesses, the government, citizens, just everyone in general to realize that we have to stop treating our local food systems like fast food joints, you know? We have to put in actual resources. We have to protect the environment. We have to protect people's health and social aspects. And we need to be, you know, really conscious of what we're doing in our local economies, because at the end of the day, we're going to continue to have different types of crises as we go forward, whether it's environmental or other pandemics, and we need our communities to be stronger and more resilient. And I think that the number one way we can do that is building better local food systems, and I think food hubs are one of the number one important ways to achieve that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, just as a quick pause, but not an actual pause, to all three of you for all your passion and amazing ideas you're bringing. I would say that I'm getting all tingly, and I hope everybody else listening is too, about what is possible and what we already know and can already increase and scale up our impact and replicate. If it's not necessarily accelerate and scale, it may be replicating and reinforcing in the many ways. So, and I think that's kind of, we have a bit of time to let you speak specifically to that. So you are three great leaders and movers and shakers within your communities, and likely with others in your community, but you also exist within an ecosystem that isn't maybe necessarily always helping you achieve realizing all the impacts and everything that you could accomplish, and maybe recognizing the value of different types of value. And like you're saying, we're talking about food autonomy and autonomous food systems, but we're talking about food autonomy also in an ethical standpoint, in a social standpoint, in a making sure that it's not just for some, and that if there's an economic crisis, that the businesses will fold and that will be the end of that. Food is an essential service, and there's a lot of other costs to a society to losing that, and that therefore a lot of value in different ways. So maybe we're going to give you the opportunity now to speak to, and I'll start with you this time, Haile, to say, if you needed something else in the ecosystem around you to shift, to be ever better to do and have the impact you desire, that you hope to have with it through the common market, and or shift things or have other open conversations, what would sort of your wish be in terms of that for the coming months, years?
Like my kids do, if you grant me one wish, I'll wish for 3 more wishes, right? I think it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. And as Common Market is beginning to delve into the different ways that we can affect change, that we can deepen the impact that we have as an organization, in part because, while I think that we've demonstrated an ability to play a market connecting role, one that is focused on equity and community and the environment. I think that we can't play that role in every market, and I think what we need to see is vastly more regional food system infrastructure that is focused on equity and that is focused on community. And one of the things that I think has created the greatest challenges for more equitable food systems has been the uneven distribution of wealth by our government agencies here in the United States, and I can't speak to how things are done in Canada, but here in the United States we have a Department of Agriculture that distributes billions of dollars a year in support of agricultural programs, and the vast majority of those resources are distributed to large commodity farms and to agro corporate interests. And if there was just a redistribution of those resources in support of small mid-scale farms, in support of regional agriculture, regional food systems, community level food systems, I think that what we would see are, I think we would see different health outcomes. Obviously, if we were to rebuild our regional food systems, which have been the center of regional food systems, I believe have been like a key equation to population and throughout human history, right? Like you build population density in a place where there's an ability to support, sustainably support consumption, right? But a reinvestment in that regional capacity to grow and sustainably produce food, I think would be transformative. And another thing I think that could just be facilitative of that would be a reorientation of institutional procurement practice, right? And so if we have schools and hospitals in a given place that are providing food to community, to develop procurement practices that actually support regional agriculture in a more meaningful way, so that local economies hold the potential of keeping more of their dollars local and reinvesting in their neighborhoods. So those are just 2 small ideas that I'm going to offer, and I guess I used 2 of my wishes. I'll pass the next one on.
Right, I'm sure we'll make a long wish list, and again, I think it's very important to iterate, like you said, a dollar spent locally circulates locally and maybe is worth more of a dollar in the end versus maybe a dollar that's spent and immediately leaves the economy. So as far as I'm sure you all know, and it's sort of a community economic development principle, that there's value beyond the actual number on a bill when it's spent locally, let's say. So, and Danielle, I'll jump to you next and let you sort of throw in what would your 1 to 3 wishes be, as you wish?
Well, I definitely echo the idea of revaluing and redistributing where we are supporting companies and institutions, and where institutions are sourcing their services. I actually think, and the optimist in me thinks that COVID has an opportunity for us to position ourselves and really not reposition, because we've been in this position for a long time, but has brought many of the issues that many people, many organizations, especially across Quebec and Canada, have been fighting for a long time, saying that that revenue inequality is detrimental to people's health. They're saying that social isolation is detrimental to people's health, and saying that sustainable local food systems are extremely important. And all of those issues now seem to be becoming more talked about in the mainstream. We're seeing people who are, mental health and social isolation is going to be a major issue going forward as the communities come out of COVID. Quebec has already talked about at a government level creating a sustainable food system, local food system, and food sovereignty has been a big topic where something that had died down over the previous, I would say, 5 to 10 years is now coming back up. And we're also seeing talk about, we're seeing within Canada where we have the CERB that offers $2,000 of income, a month of income support versus social assistance rates at $613 a month. We're seeing an acknowledgement on the part of the federal government that local social assistance rates aren't sufficient to survive. So I think that there is, the optimist in me says that there is an opportunity to position ourselves as solutions and to work towards solutions for these issues that are now coming to the forefront. And then the cynic in me says it's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to need a huge movement, and we're going to need political support and community support and support on all levels. So I think we got a long road ahead.
Absolutely. I share. I'm typically an eternal optimist, but I feel it is going to be a lot of work, unfortunately, and hopefully people listening in today and other people who hear this will join in to lend some supporting hands. So I'll pass it on to you, Alicia, as well, to share your wishes as to what we need going forward, and again, now or in the coming years.
Yeah, so I think I also have a lot of wishes. Usually when I'm in doing any presentation, I try to end it by saying, that I want everyone to save the world 3 times a day and think about the food that they put in their mouth. So I think that's always one of my wishes, is just to have people think about the system they're creating every time they put food in their mouth. But I think that on another note, one of the big issues that we have in food systems work is kind of a lack of appreciation or understanding by a lot of the funding actors that the work we're doing has all of these different economic, social, health, and environmental implications. And sometimes it's very difficult to get to a level of sustainability immediately so that your enterprise can fund all of the different wonderful activities that you're doing. And and I take that very seriously as somebody with an MBA who's always worked in business, and I'm very business minded. But at the end of the day, for a lot of the work we're doing, there's really no operational funding available. So when we take on grants to do new wonderful projects and try to save the world, it's just coming out of somebody else's time. So I think that that would be one of my dreams in life would be if the funders realize that, what, sometimes we really do need to support people's operations and actually support staff time. And I typically push back, against our Department of Agriculture here, Haile, and I say, you guys all have staff also. So, it isn't really necessarily fair that, we're doing work that no one else wants to do. In the social economy, but it's extremely important work, and we know that it's making huge impacts to our farming community and to our citizens, in general. So there should be some value in that, and we should be able to hire enough staff to do that work. So those are my 2 wishes.
Absolutely, and I think they're important wishes, and we see this a lot, and I think it's very true that some of the most innovative people we see are unfortunately those that actually lack access to different resources as well, and so become innovative also in face of that lack of access to resources, which has its pluses and minuses for those having to do it. But I think that now is also a time to look at how people who've historically has lack of access to resources at different types, and recognition of just running an organization costs money and requires additional resources. How can we maybe switch the switch our perspective on that, and then say that let's support where those people have been able to be innovative and help them go further and make impact. So I'm going to put it out there now too, to anybody that's listening in right now. It is a time for you, if you have any questions, to put that into the chat box, and we'll try and get a few questions here in our last 10 minutes for our panelists. This is a rare opportunity to speak to these amazing three people. And I would just to sort of close the last statement, we have worked for a while at Récolte to figure out how to summarize what we think is a need, and we've come to the, if you plant a healthy seed in dead soil, it's not going to survive and thrive and grow as well as it could if it was in a thriving ecosystem that supported it. And I think that's where we're at right now with a lot of organizations and entrepreneurs on the ground saying, not only is it the job of them to innovate and to bring amazing innovative solutions to what they do at a community level, it's also our role to start looking at what they need to have a thriving ecosystem to help them survive, thrive, grow, and increase their impact. So I challenge any of you that are in the audience right now listening that think you may have a role in that to start thinking about that, and feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll put you in touch with them happily as well if you have ideas on how you can help to do that. So all ecosystems thrive when they are diverse and healthy and have multiple elements and people taking part. So, and just quickly to say that one of the other reasons we're interested in hosting this panel is that Récolte is also working, and Daniel is one of our partners, and Haile and Alicia, we'd love to have you as partners, but I think we'll be reaching out to you a lot, because under the Smart Cities Challenge for Montreal, we actually are looking at this question of infrastructure, reinforcing local sustainable food systems, distribution, physical space, other logistics, including also data and information. And so we're really in the beginning of 4 years of a really interesting exploratory process around what is the role of infrastructure in supporting local food systems. Again, we're really lucky to have people around us, such as Haile and Alicia, that we can reach out to and learn from what they've done, as well as other actors, and being able to work directly with Daniel. So if you are interested in also in looking at what's going to be coming up in Montreal, this is the work that we'll be doing with ourselves and multiple partners, and including the City of Montreal. So please feel free to reach out to us too. As we move forward, we'll be doing other resources, hopefully other webinars where we can deep dive into some of these models as well today, and resources where we're going to be capturing lessons learned and sharing those. So we do have a resource center on our website that we're developing, and happy to also share any resources from other organizations such as yours, and anybody out there that has information that they think can contribute to helping people understand the role of infrastructure and information and data sharing and collaborative structures that can help us move forward. So we're happy to try and centralize some of that information. So we'll go to the questions. I think I have questions around purchasing practices and sort of institutional markets and purchasing practices within your organizations, and how that may differ, and also what that may look like. So is there any thing that you wanted to quickly point to sort of around criteria that you've put around purchasing practices within your organization that sort of reinforce also the distribution, purchasing, aggregation parts of your businesses? I can put, I'll put it to you, Alicia, first, if you wanted to try and respond to that, if there's something around even just how you've structured your purchasing practices.
Yes, sorry, I'm only getting about every second or third word, but I think you're talking about purchasing through the organization.
Yeah, well, I think, and we can go back to the fact that your model has sort of members across the food system and across the chain. How does that maybe influence also reflections on purchasing practices and who you purchase from and what the criteria is around that?
Okay. Yep. Okay. So so with our food hub, we have members who are food producers from across our island, and not just farmers. It's primarily farmers, but we also have people who are doing processed products like jams, jellies, maple syrup, honey. We have several bakeries that participate in our food hub. We have some seafood producers, and really that idea really comes back to the fact that we are a multi-stakeholder cooperative, and our consumers really want a wide range of products. They want to be able to order everything they want from their computer or on their phone, and have all that delivered instead of having to go to multiple different places, you know, so if they only got their vegetables or whatever, right? So that's kind of where we sit with that. There has been pressure, you know, at different points on, you know, should we allow producers who are only organic, but here in Cape Breton, we don't have a lot of certified organic producers. We have a lot of non-certified organic producers, so it gets very complicated. So really, what we've tried to do there is just to give our consumers as much information as possible. So we always try to make sure that it's very clear who is practicing organic, who is certified organic, and who is not, and maybe what they're doing. So then we also have, you know, just on the products range, we have, you know, obviously household amounts, but then our producers are also able to sell bulk amounts to restaurants, institutions, retail stores, that type of thing also.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the questions I could build off of it, maybe I'll ask you, Haile, is there something that can be done different from institutional food buyers? So institutional food buyers that maybe want to work more with local regional food co-ops and knowing that scale and size of purchasing is a big part, and also maybe level of transformation as well. Do you have any ideas, thoughts around institutional food buyers?
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges with institutions as a market opportunity is that the whole model for cafeteria feeding has been changed dramatically in the time of COVID, and it's given us cause to really just, you know, again, think about what the institution represents within a community. And I mean, and really, if you unbox the institution, for us, it just has been an efficient means for connecting with people, right? And so for us, I think we've been looking, yes, to continue and sustain our institutional relationships, but really deepen the relationships that facilitate us connecting more directly with community and more directly with households. I think, unfortunately, the world of institutional procurement has become incredibly challenging for small and mid-scale farmers to participate in. And you know, we have supported many of the requirements that institutions force upon, and in our case, the government also forces upon small and mid-scale farmers who want to sell wholesale product in the name of keeping people safe. And we're very much supportive of keeping people safe in that way, but also are, you know, looking for mechanisms of verification and practices that may be different than GAP certification and other requirements put upon small producers. So I guess my biggest recommendation would be to find the market that is best suited for your scale of production, for the quality and the values that you represent as a producer. And I think more often than not, it's about, again, connecting directly with individuals as opposed to with intermediaries.
Thank you. We have a few more questions that maybe from within our team as well that want to speak to you more about this. So, but we'll have to pause it for now because it's running short on time. I see Xavier has turned his camera on, which is probably a good indication of that as well. So, Daniel, I don't know if you want to say in 1 minute or less, sort of any other thoughts you may have around institutional food procurement or types of purchasing then in terms of the effects on the depot?
I can just say that as an institution ourselves, we're a nonprofit charity, although charity model is not really our sole business model, but even internally, it's difficult to support local agriculture. Sometimes it's a battle. We passed a healthy food policy, which ensures what kind of food we produce, what we put in all of our programs, including our emergency food baskets. That includes a variety of food, a variety of healthy food, an abundance of fresh fruit and vegetables, and locally sourced when possible. But that when possible is even a debate in terms of procuring, because we want to be fiscally responsible. So it's something that we are continuing to work on internally. It's not as easy as we would like it to be, but it's something we're working towards.
Thank you. So here I'm going to have to say, this is the end of this conversation, but thank you enormously once again to Haile Johnston, to Daniel Rotman, and to Alicia Lake. We hope to continue the conversation again with these three panelists and be able to deep dive on a whole bunch of different issues in the years to come. hopefully even in the months again, but to be discussed within. And once again, thank you for reinforcing and all the work that you do in reinforcing our local food communities, reinforcing sustainable food communities, and on reinforcing local economies as well, and supporting those right now in a time of crisis that really are in need. If you do have any further interest in the project that we'll be working on in Montreal, it's not me that you would be in touch with. It's our fabulous program director, program manager, Lorenzo Diaz, who can be reached at the information there below. But if you have any other information, once again, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to also put you in touch with our panelists if you have questions for them. And thank you again enormously for all of your work and all that you're doing.
Here we go. Thank you for your times, everyone. So I was very, very useful. Actually, we don't necessarily know everything about what you do, guys, but obviously this is something that we are going to promote in the next forthcoming years for the SIAL. I believe in it, and we are supporting this kind of cause from the beginning. And just to mention that I know that Daniel was not necessarily very happy about that, but we have always supported Moisson Montréal since the beginning of the SIAL Canada show, but we are going to maybe diversify our help, I should say. So thank you again, Laura, and all your panelists. And I remind everyone of our audience that this conference will be available on our YouTube channel and on the virtual show in the replay conferences section in the menu. So thanks everyone for your time and to support, and have a great virtual visit. Thank you.